Welcome. This is Roger Stone, and you are entering the Stone Zone here on the Red Apple Audio Networks. Here we talk politics. We eat, sleep, and breathe politics. I'm a veteran of 13 national presidential campaigns. I cut my teeth with President Richard Nixon, worked for Governor Ronald Reagan in 1976 as an insurgent challenging Gerald Ford, then again when he was successfully elected president in 1980, and then proudly worked on the president's re-election in 1984. It was in the run-up to the 1980 election that I first met Donald J. Trump, and I may be the first person in the country who, in 1988, urged Trump to make a serious bid for the presidency. I saw then that Trump had the strength, the courage, the stamina, and the independence to be not just a great presidential candidate, but a truly great president. I believe he approved it today in a major dust-up in the White House where Donald Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance essentially double-teamed Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Trump set the tone when Zelensky showed up in his usual garb. He was wearing a dirty sweatshirt. Now, I don't get this. We've given this guy $350 million, but he can't wear a suit and tie to meet with the President of the United States? He wore a suit and tie when he addressed the World Economic Forum. I think it is disrespectful both to the President of the United States and to the American taxpayers who have given his war effort more than $350 billion. Listen to Donald Trump's take.
Your country is in big trouble.
Can I
Wait a
answer?
minute. No. You've done a lot of talking. Your country is in big trouble.
I know.
You're not winning.
I know.
You're not winning this. You have a damn good chance of coming out okay because of us.
Mr. President, we are staying in our country, staying strong from the very beginning of the war. We've been alone, and we are thankful. I said thanks
you haven't
in
been
this
alone.
cabinet,
you
and not
been
only
alone.
in this cabinet.
We gave you, through
I
this
said
stupid president, $350 billion.
You voted
we gave
for
you
your
military
president.
equipment,
You
and you
voted
men
for
are
your
brave,
president.
but they had to use our military.
What about West?
If you didn't have
You
our
invited
military
me.
equipment,
You invited
if
me
you
to
didn't
speak.
have our military equipment, this war would have been over in 2 weeks.
This astonishing turn of events could scramble affairs in Europe and around the globe, but during his visit with Trump, Zelensky was expected to sign a deal allowing the U.S. greater access to Ukraine's rare earth minerals, and they were supposed to hold a joint press conference, but that plan was scrapped after the heated engagement between the two leaders. Here, I think, is the key point, and that is President Trump is insisting that Zelensky repay part, at least, of the more than $350 billion that we have sent. But the diminutive former actor who now heads the Ukrainian nation is refusing. It remains to see what, if anything, Donald Trump wants to do to get this back on track. But one thing is very clear. The American people are tired of endless foreign war in which our inherent interests are not clear. The false narrative that the aggression by the Russians was caused solely because of their territorial ambitions is false. We signed an agreement, the Budapest Memorandum, and then later again reaffirmed it in the Minsk Accords, in which we agreed that if the Russians agreed to the reunification of East and West Germany, that we would not push Ukraine, which is on Russia's border, into NATO. More importantly, we would not mount NATO missiles pointed at Russia on the ground in Ukraine. Folks, those silos are already built, and we uncovered that there are, as we now know, bioweapons labs throughout the country. Assistant Secretary of State Victoria Nuland of the Biden administration actually spit that out and then tried to take it back under oath in a Senate committee hearing. So the idea that Putin wants to gobble up all of Ukraine, then he's going to take Poland, then Germany, then France. This is a narrative that has been promulgated by the neocons. The problem, of course, is it's not true. and now the American people want some of their largesse back. This day in history, 8 years ago, on February 28th, 2017, Donald J. Trump, in his first month as president, delivered his first address to a joint session of Congress at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. While not technically a State of the Union address, this speech outlined his plan for tax cuts, his plan for infrastructure spending, and his planned reform of health care. From the very beginning, President Trump has proven that he keeps his promises. In the first presidency, he built a model economy, the most robust economy we had in America up until that time. He not only had the lowest levels of unemployment among all Americans, black Americans, white Americans, rural, urban, young, old. He set records when it came to job creation. He also brought billions of dollars back into the country to be invested here, to create jobs here. It is amazing now that he has scored the greatest single comeback in American history. But it's very different than 2017 because he is a much wiser president. I actually think the 2 years in the wilderness, the 2 years of fighting the outrageous tsunami of lawfare, has made him far more prepared in terms of understanding how Washington works, on understanding the treachery of the two-party duopoly, who don't like the fact that there's a new sheriff in town, and who seem committed to endless war, censorship of our free speech rights, and think that, well, Big Pharma and Big Food should remain unchecked in terms of their ability to make profits, while no one is checking on the safety and effectiveness of the drugs and food that they are feeding our families. Apple had some interesting news today. It confirmed that their iPhones had a glitch in their voice-to-text feature, so that whenever anyone said the word racist, it would come up with the word Trump. In a viral TikTok video, the voice-to-text feature was observed briefly flashing Trump when a user said racist before it quickly changed back to racist. Now, this is interesting. I've had some experience with Apple. You see, Apple to this day refuses to turn over to the Secret Service or the FBI the contents of the cell phone of Thomas Crooks, the man they claim was the shooter of Donald Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania. Apple said it would be an invasion of the late Mr. Crooks' privacy. That's funny because Apple turned over all of my cell phone records to Robert Mueller and his thugs in the Russian collusion hoax without even receiving a subpoena. We realize that the politically correct nature of Apple is one of the largest problems in the country. But those who think that just because Elon Musk has established what used to be Twitter, now known as X, as a free speech paragon, and there are still problems there, let's be candid, but now that he has done so, that does not mean that there's not still shadow banning and censorship going on at Facebook, not only Facebook, but also Instagram. It's interesting to me because I remain banned for life on both Facebook and Instagram. I was in a restaurant the other night, and a guy came up to me and said, hey, Stone, where's that crypto I bought from you? I said, pardon me? That crypto I bought from you on Facebook. Folks, there's a bunch of Roger Stones on Facebook. Not a single one of them is mine, and I urge you not to buy crypto from them. I'm Roger Stone. You're in the Stone Zone here on the Red Apple Audio Networks, and we'll be right back. And we're back. It appears that the Jeffrey Epstein files are being held by a rogue element in the New York FBI. The New York field office of the FBI and the federal prosecutors in the Southern District of New York refused to initially turn over documents in the Jeffrey Epstein case, reported Attorney General Pam Bondi to the Nation today. Yesterday, Bondi ordered the delivery of these files to the Department of Justice by 8 o'clock this morning. We're still waiting to hear whether they complied with her order. Newly minted FBI Director Kash Patel promised a complete cooperation and promised to hunt down any former or current employees running interference on the orders of Bondi and Patel. In fact, the information released yesterday, every bit of it, can be found in my book, The Clintons' War on Women, published all the way back in 2015. Now, Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna initially announced that she will be holding a special committee meeting to release the Epstein documents. 2 days ago, she began demanding the release of documents that Pam Bondi never possessed because of the obstruction of the Southern District of New York prosecutors. Luna recently said she wants to subpoena members of the Warren Commission. Let's listen to Congresswoman Luna.
Yeah, I was going to say, based on what we're actually looking to do with the JFK investigation, I'm looking to actually bring in some of the attending physicians at the initial assassination, and then also people that had been on the various commissions looking into, like the Warren Commission looking into the initial assassinations.
The idea of bringing in the doctors who attended President John F. Kennedy at Parkland Hospital is a good one. A powerful new documentary, What the Parkland Doctors Saw, very compelling. As far as subpoenaing the members of the Warren Commission, Congresswoman, there's one minor problem. All of them are dead. Okay, I don't think President Donald Trump gets enough credit for it, but in his first term, he shut down some of the worst taxpayer-funded animal abuses imaginable, from deadly dog and cat experiments to dangerous bat labs in Wuhan. My old friends at the nonprofit White Coast Waste Project have recently released a 4-point plan for Trump 2.0 that can save billions of dollars but end this horrific practice of cruel and inhumane, quote-unquote, scientific experiments on dogs, cats, and other primates. Here to join me to talk about this as a fellow dog lover is Justin Goodman. He is the Senior Vice President of Advocacy and Public Policy at the White Coast Waste Project. For more than 15 years, Justin has led a high-profile, winning grassroots and lobbying campaign to expose the endful waste and cruel taxpayer-funded experiments on dogs, cats, and other animals. Justin Goodman, welcome to the Stone Zone.
Thank you. It's a pleasure and an honor to be back, Roger.
There is really nothing in the Trump's first presidency that I am prouder of working with your organization, White Coat Waste, as a volunteer to try to end this inhumane practice. Working together, we were very successful in getting the Department of Transportation, for example, to end these horrific and I think pointless experiments. Recently, you testified before Congress on this issue. Tell us where the fight stands.
Sure, Roger. Yeah, I agree with you that Trump hasn't gotten enough credit for the historic progress he made to end wasteful and cruel, horrendous animal testing on dogs, cats, monkeys, and other animals at agencies like the VA, the EPA, the USDA. I was on Capitol Hill a couple of weeks ago testifying at a House Oversight Committee hearing that was called Transgender Lab Rats and Poisoned Puppies was the title, which both of those things reference some of our investigations. And I explained to Congresswoman Nancy Mace and Lauren Boebert and the other committee members how a lot of people don't realize that the U.S. government is the single largest funder of animal testing in not only the country, but in the world. The U.S. government, Uncle Sam, with our tax dollars, they waste about $20 billion a year on animal testing, both around this country and in foreign labs and all around the world, hundreds of them. One of the things I highlighted to the committee was that, despite what happened in Wuhan, obviously we all know that the coronavirus pandemic likely broke out at the Wuhan lab that was funded by Dr. Fauci and USAID, and we had the receipts for that back in early 2020 and broke that story. But despite what happened there, there's still 26 animal labs in China that the NIH is shipping tax dollars to. One of these labs that is getting money right now from the NIH and the DOD one of these Chinese labs is abusing 300 beagle puppies every single week. This is what the contract says. We've gotten it through a Freedom of Information Act investigation. The NIH and the DOD are paying a Chinese lab to abuse 300 beagles every single week in cruel and unnecessary drug testing. And we've shut down some labs, some cat labs in Russia. But the problem's bad. And despite, Trump made great progress, but despite what happened, during the 2016 to 2020, some of that progress was reversed under Joe Biden. And we're very enthusiastic that Donald Trump will pick up where he left off, and especially with some of the nominees headed to these health agencies. A lot of people, and we could talk a little more about that, but I was just watching a clip of Joe Rogan and Elon Musk's conversation that they had yesterday on the Joe Rogan show on his podcast, and they were discussing wasteful government spending, and the two prime examples they gave were things that White Coat Waste uncovered and that were discussed at the hearing. Number one, how the NIH, the National Science Foundation, and even the U.S. Department of Agriculture are funding transgender experiments on animals where they're taking lab monkeys and mice and rats, giving them surgeries and hormone therapies to mimic transgender human adults and children, and then performing horrendous experiments on them with drugs and vaccines and overdosing them with party drugs used at gay sex parties. This is all in documents that we've obtained from the federal government. So the problem is really bad, but again, we're optimistic that the Trump administration can put a dent in this problem pretty quickly.
This is really sick. We're going to talk more about it on the other side. Congresswoman Nicole Malliotakis of Staten Island has been a major leader and ally in this important effort to end the brutal torture, this barbaric torture of cats, dogs, monkeys, and others. We'll be right back. Don't go away. We'll have more of Justin Goodman right here in the Stone Zone. Welcome back. You are in the Stone Zone, and we're continuing our conversation with Justin Goodman. He is the Senior Vice President for Advocacy and Public Policy for the White Coat Waste Project. What they do is fight the cruel, barbaric, inhumane torture of animals being conducted by our federal government for no discernible scientific reason, feeding cocaine to kittens, shoving marbles up the anus of monkeys, cutting the vocal cords of beagles. These are just an example of these barbaric experiments. President Donald Trump really stopped a lot of this. He planned to phase it out at the EPA, at the Department of Transportation, at the Department of Defense, and he even talked about abolishing the National Institute for Allergy and Infectious Diseases. But then Joe Biden essentially brought it all back. So, Justin Goodman, tell us what the next steps are. Seems to me the timing couldn't be better. Next week, you have the confirmation hearings that begin for Trump's leaders at NIH, the National Institute of Health, and the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration. Seems to me to be the perfect opportunity to grill these nominees on the question of the abuse of these animals.
Yeah, we're really enthusiastic. The NIH is really broken and needs serious reforms. This is the single largest funder of animal testing in the world. And they've even given awards, the NIH, to people, to experts who estimate that 87.5% of the biomedical research we fund through the NIH is wasteful. So the NIH, on one hand, is funding more animal testing, more biomedical research than anyone else, and on the other hand, talking about how wasteful it is. And we need someone to come in there and clean it up. And, we're very enthusiastic that Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, has been nominated to run the NIH. He's a big fan of White Coat Waste Project. I've spoken on his Twitter Spaces, his X Spaces before about these issues, gain-of-function research, and he's called White Coat Waste absolute heroes. So, I couldn't be happier with Dr. Bhattacharya being nominated, and we have our fingers crossed that he'll get through the process and become the NIH director pretty soon. Like I said, Elon and Joe Rogan were just talking about some of the wasteful animal testing we've exposed at the NIH, and they're really lagging behind other agencies that, under the Trump administration especially, started to make great progress to end animal testing. The EPA, the VA, the USDA all started to end dog and cat testing under Trump. But the NIH has actually ramped it up thanks to people like Dr. Fauci, who's been funding horrendous experiments on dogs and cats all over the world. A lot of people probably remember that kind of iconic photo that we exposed back in 2021 of the beagle puppies with their heads in mesh cages that were filled with biting flies, eating them alive. You know, those projects, those are the type of things that the NIH is funding. Cocaine injections, injecting puppies with cocaine is something that's still happening. These horrible drug tests on 300 beagles a week in China that I mentioned, the NIH is footing the bill for. So we have some priorities for the NIH that we're hopeful Dr. Bhattacharya will tackle. Number one is defunding dog and cat testing. Number two, defunding all these labs in China and other adversarial nations. We should not be shipping tax dollars for animal abusing laboratories in adversarial nations that don't have our best interest in mind. We all saw what happened in Wuhan. It is a recipe for disaster to keep sending money to these unaccountable labs in China. And, you know, this is something you and I have talked about and written about, and I know Donald Trump is supportive of, dismantling Dr. Fauci's division of the NIH, where he built a little empire that funded this dangerous animal experimentation that already caused a pandemic and might cause another one if someone doesn't intervene. Right now, Fauci's division of NIH is funding the establishment and construction of a bat lab in Colorado, where they are going to import bats from Asia and import them to Colorado to do experiments with Ebola, with Nipah, horrendously painful and deadly viruses for which there is no cure, doing COVID experiments. This is their plan. It started under Fauci, but we still have a chance to stop it. We do not need to import this dangerous and unnecessary animal experimentation to our shores. And again, obviously Donald Trump is on board with all of this. When we first exposed Fauci's funding for the Wuhan lab, President Trump went on TV a couple days later, called it tremendous waste, and cut that grant on national television. One of the highlights of our work at White Coat, one of the highlights of my career. We need to do that again. We need to bring an axe and start slashing and burning at the NIH. We're already seeing that happening, but there's a lot of more work that can be done.
Folks, in the next segment, we are going to be taking your calls. That number, 800-848-9222, 800-848-9222. We continue now with our interview with Justin Goodman of the White Coat Waste Project. This is an important question because you are a nonprofit. Before I volunteered my time back in 2017, 2018, I looked at your published financials. You run a very lean shop. You're putting most of your money into spreading the word about these horrific, barbaric treatment of animals. But if people want to contribute, where can they go?
They can visit our website, whitecoatwaste.org. Visit us at White Coat Waste on all the social media platforms. So that's whitecoatwaste.org for our website, at White Coat Waste on social. And, you know, as you said, Roger, we are a lean, mean fighting machine. We are a 501c3 nonprofit. We have a small staff of just about a dozen employees. We don't have, you know, there's not like a lot of executive bloat. We're not throwing fancy galas. We actually don't do any galas. We don't do any physical fundraising events. All of our resources that we're getting from our donors are going into these campaigns to find, expose, and defund wasteful government spending on animal tests.
You know, I am haunted by that iconic, now unfortunately, photograph where Dr. Fauci has these beagles. They're laying on their side. Their heads are inside this enclosed contraption, and they have sand fleas literally eating the flesh on their heads and faces. Could you explain to me the scientific value of this?
There's none at all, Roger. I mean, the the FDA, which obviously regulates drug approvals, have stated that they do not require dog testing. This is an archaic, cruel, crude artifact of just a bygone time where, you know, mad scientists tortured animals, and unfortunately it's become big business. So it continues. There's companies, literally puppy mills and kitten mills, that are subsidized by tax dollars to breed puppies and kittens to be abused in experiments. They're born to die. There's companies across this country right now receiving millions of our tax dollars. It's big businesses. Colleges and universities rake in billions of dollars a year for animal experimentation. And on top of the animal experimentation money they get tax dollars from the NIH that go into these slush funds that support executive salaries, administrative costs, construction, and have nothing to do with improving public health. That's one of the things that the scientific community is so up in arms about right now, is the Trump administration issued an order to cap this money going into these slush funds at colleges and universities that are torturing animals. So this is a great step in the right direction. His move on indirect costs is going to cut billions of wasteful spending on animal testing and save countless animals' lives. So we're already seeing some really positive momentum to end these experiments, because this is all about the money for these people. The only people who benefit from torturing animals in laboratories are the people who are cashing the checks to do it.
I really think this speaks to Fauci's character. When I researched my book on Lyndon Johnson, the man who killed Kennedy, the case against LBJ, and referenced in Robert Caro's Pulitzer Prize-winning biography, Lyndon Johnson as a boy would shove a lit cherry bomb, that's like a firecracker, an explosive, down the throat of a dog in order to watch the dog explode. He once beat a mule to death with a baseball bat. This speaks to a very psychotic nature. So I guess my question is, we only have about a minute and 45 seconds. Do you think Dr. Fauci, who with his wife legally, unfortunately, made millions and millions and millions of dollars out of the vaccinations that he was advocating and trying to mandate, do you think he will ever be brought to justice for these horrific acts?
Well, fortunately, I think there are still some ways, even though he's been pardoned, to hold him accountable. And I want to be clear here. You know, and you and I have talked about this, Roger. Fauci wasn't just a paper pusher at the NIH. This guy was torturing animals with his own two hands for many decades. He was infecting chimps with HIV in the 80s. Until the day he left the NIH in 2022, he was still torturing monkeys in experiments, giving them HIV and doing other horrendous infectious disease experiments on them. So he's not innocent by any means. He's not just, again, some bureaucrat at the NIH. He's an animal abuser himself. But obviously, states can still hold him accountable for what happened, even though he has a federal pardon. He did lie repeatedly in depositions, both federally and in the Missouri case brought against him by now Senator Eric Schmidt and others. So I think he might be held accountable by the states, but the one thing we can do to dismantle his legacy inside the federal government is to abolish his division of the NIH and cut funding for all these horrendous animal tests that he put into motion.
Well, the Bible tells us that vengeance is reserved for the Lord, but in this case, there is no reason why we cannot pray for it. Let me thank my guest, Justin Goodman. Tell us again, really quickly, how can people contribute?
WhiteCoatWaste.org to sign up for our mailing list to contribute, and at Whitecoat Waste on all the social media platforms. Roger, we are so grateful for your support and leadership on this.
Thank you very much for joining us today on the Stone Zone.
To that home out on the range, they got a lot of nice girls. I'm racing.
And we're back. This is my favorite segment. We call it the Stone Zone on the phone. We're taking your calls at 800-848-9222. And let's go to Joe in Trenton. I've been to Trenton since, Lorenzo's at the train station, one of my favorite Italian restaurants, closed down. That was quite a few years ago.
That was a great restaurant. Roger, my first reaction after watching that incident at the White House, somebody got to Zelensky, and listen, I might sound like conspiratorial, but it sounds like maybe the World Economic Forum group might have been the one to get to him, because if there's anybody that doesn't want to see Trump succeed, it's that bunch. What are your thoughts on it?
Well, look, I think there's a lot of insanity. I had a call today from a very well-known reporter. Now, this reporter is a sane person, somebody I disagree with, but I respect. But they actually asked me, quite seriously, whether I thought Donald Trump was a Russian asset, whether Donald Trump sometime in the 1980s had come under the control of Russia. And here's the best one. Whether his 1988 flirtation with the presidency was an idea hatched in Russia. Since that was an idea hatched by me, sitting with Donald Trump, I knew it was nonsensical. But when you stand in the way of the war machine and those who are profiting mightily, you become a target. The idea that Donald Trump is loyal to anybody other than the American people is absurd. But $350 billion is a lot of money. And all the fake news stories over the last 2 years that the Ukrainians were kicking the daylights out of the Russians and wait until the spring offensive and so on, this war is hopeless for the Ukrainians. And the killing must stop. It is not that Trump is pro-Russian. It is that he wants the killing to stop. Joe Biden blurted this out at the beginning of the war when he said, well, I would have been willing to give them the Donbass, which is the Russian-speaking region of the country to the east. So there was never any reason to have this war. If Donald Trump had been, I think, rightfully given the office in 2020, which I think he won, we would not have had this war. And Zelensky is refusing to call any portion of what he has been given a loan. He doesn't want to give any of it back. That's what this fight was about today. I put my trust in Donald Trump. He knows he must end this war. No, he is not going to let the Russians take all of Ukraine. But hopefully, I think we can all pray for a swift resolution, because the carnage here on both sides, with the Russians and the Ukrainians now conscripting 15 and 16-year-olds, this really must stop. Joe, thanks for calling from Trenton, and we do miss Lorenzo's, don't we?
Yes, yes.
All right.
Great steaks. Yep.
They were great. All right, Zach in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Thanks for calling into the Stone Zone. What's on your mind, Zach?
Well, Roger, thank you. I just kind of wanted to say that, the way Trump handled Zelensky is exactly what we voted for. And, I hope that we continue to see this kind of transparency. I know it's not anything I've seen in my lifetime, especially with him willing to show us the good, the bad, or the ugly. But I kind of wanted to know, historically speaking, with your context, who do you think is similar to what we've seen before? Because I think a lot of people are in shock. And I'm sure it's happened in the past.
It's an excellent question. By the way, folks, our number, 800-848-9222, 800-848-9222. If you have a question, Zach, let me address your question. I think a leader like Donald Trump comes along once a century, really. He is unique. He's not a politician. He'll never be a politician. He's the leader of a political movement. It's not the same thing. I can just tell you firsthand, having known him now for almost 50 years. By the way, he hates it when I say that because he says it makes both of us sound old. He's not handled. He is not scripted. He is not managed. He is not packaged. What you see is what you get. Yes, he asks a broad cross-section of people for their opinion. He works the phones hard, late into the night, seeking advice from many. But at the end of the day, he's his own man. He makes his own decisions. He decides what he will sign, what he will say, where he will go, who he will meet with, who he will appoint. I think that's why the American people elected him. He is completely outside the box, meaning while he is not always eloquent, he is always articulate, meaning you always know exactly where he stands. I think it was time for Zelensky to get his uppance. The Biden administration continued to kiss his derriere, and we continue to ship him more and more money, and this really has to stop. I agree with Tucker Carlson. Why are we shipping billions to Ukraine when there are homeless veterans in this country, when there are horrific problems in this country? So, Zach, thanks so much for your call. Let's see. Let's go to David in Oxnard, California. You're calling about the Epstein information.
Yes, sir. Thanks. With the FBI stonewalling us, no pun intended, on the Epstein docs, what do you think of Pam Bondi, since she's not happy with them? What do you think about her offering Ghislaine a deal to testify and name names, and then maybe send her back to the UK and let them deal with her? Why are we paying for her incarceration?
Well, the problem, of course, is we don't know whether she tells us would be the truth, or maybe she would just use it to take out her plight on people that she particularly hates. Well, this woman was a horrific pimp. If you read my book, the Clinton's War on Women, you will see precisely what I'm talking about. This is, I think, really unlikely. I think that she should be prosecuted to the full extent of the law, and I think we need all of the facts. And I think they are yet to come. That rogue element in the FBI really needs to spit up the information. Folks, thanks for joining us today in the Stone Zone. We very much appreciate you. And remember, we get to the bottom of politics. We give you the stone cold truth here every day in the Stone Zone. God bless you and Godspeed until we meet again.